My name is Marcus and I'm here on behalf of Fracture Sounds to show you their latest Blueprint instrument, Textural Piano. And if you happen to be new here, Blueprint is a series of free sample instruments compatible with the Kontakt Player that are curated from Fracture Sounds' experiments and passion projects. And in the case of Textural Pianos, this is one created by our founder and CEO Will Bedford himself to create interweaving textures in the style of string formations, Zen meditations, and trails. I'm going to walk you through the controls really quickly, and then I'm going to show you a short piece of demo music that I've written which is based around Textural Pianos and shows it off quite well in context. So yeah, we've got something a little bit different to our usual Blueprint today. For anybody who might not have seen this interface before, this is a layer blends engine that's been created by Fracture Sounds, which we found firstly in Zen meditations and then later in trails and string formations. And essentially you have three layers that you can build up on top of each other using CC1 or your mod wheel, which kind of acts as a dynamic controller. So on the very lowest setting, we've got just this first layer, which is called Murmuring Pianos. And then as I bring the mod wheel up, we get skipping stones as well. And then finally, as I go to the top of the mod wheel range, we get flourish and dwindle. Now these layers do sound quite similar to each other, and this gives you a nice starting point to jump off from, but to talk you through the controls for each layer quickly, you have the option here to solo each one. So if we wanted to listen to just flourish and dwindle on its own, here's how that sounds. But if you want to start customizing it, you can click on any of these layers and change it to one of your choosing. And we have quite a few to choose from here between electric piano, grand piano, and upright. So I might just choose Whirlpool, which I particularly like. Let me just solo that again so you can hear it. And in the context of the other layers, you can make this one stand out even further by changing the octave that it plays at. You can either move it up one or down one. However, if you're just looking to find some inspiration and you're not too fussed about kind of going into this much detail, this shuffle button right here in the middle of the interface is a great way of getting a randomly generated combination of layers, which is a nice way of finding something that you might not otherwise have thought of. Lovely. I think we've got a few electric keys in there as well by the sounds of it. I think this one in particular was quite nice. Sounds a bit like wind chimes almost. Nice. So let's say that I wanted to keep that layer, but I'd like to keep shuffling the other two. I can hit this lock button here, and now when I hit shuffle, that one will remain fixed as is, so we can keep that nice sound. Let's try it again. That's lovely, I could cry. Staying on topic, really easy to find some inspiring combinations, and I can save this perhaps as a snapshot, which I will do so by hitting this little save icon up here. And then I'm going to call this one Wind Chimes. So that's now saved as a little preset, and as you can see, Fracture Sounds have included a few of their own for you to choose from if you want to hear what they particularly like the sounds of. So let's try Lucid Dreams. You can see it's unlocked that layer again, which obviously makes sense. Nice. Maybe let's try Distant Connections. So we can hear the reverb tail of this one going for quite a long distance. If I set this back to default quickly and talk you through the controls here at the bottom, we have attack and release, which is the start and end of the note. Let me bring this all the way down. Release. It's quite nice to bring this up, I find. Nice. Reset these again like that. And then here we have something that I find quite useful, a low pass and high pass filter. In the context of this being used for textures can be extremely useful. The high pass I think is really good, especially if you're doing something a bit higher up the keyboard. And then finally we have Fracture Sounds' delay and reverb. And if I click on the cogwheels next to these, you can see we have a few more parameters to tweak these to our liking, including this little ping pong bat, which pans the delay left and right, which is really nice, as well as a different type of delay. So let's maybe put this on tape. I'm going to turn up the, I'll leave the time where it is, but I'm going to turn the feedback up though a little bit, turn this up too. Same with the reverb. If I click on the cogwheels here, we've got a couple of different types under this sub-menu. My personal favorite is shimmer, so I'm going to leave it where it is, but I will turn this up for a really dreamy and ambient sound. And that does it for the controls. However, if I shuffle this button here, you'll notice the controls stay consistent, even if you're choosing different layers. So I'll hit shuffle a couple more times and see how this one sounds, but I will turn the delay and reverb back down a little bit. Ooh, that's nice. I wouldn't instinctively opt to have two layers that are shifted down by an octave, but I love that really dark sound. I might save that as a snapshot as well. I'm going to call that one 101 Dalmatians. And on that note, I think that does it for the controls and features found in this instrument. I could keep going and shuffle and show you other snapshots, but I just highly recommend downloading this and then trying them out for yourself. In the meantime, however, let me show you how it sounds in context with this little piece of music that I've written, made entirely using Blueprint instruments. So yeah, I hope you'll agree that in terms of the sound of the instruments, at the very least, we've got some really lovely textures going on here. And in the spirit of Piano Day, I've tried to write something that includes all of Fracture Sounds' pianos so far. So we've got Epic Grand, we've got Toy Piano, and then finally Textural pianos. I've just realised that I probably could have included electric keys too. However, I felt like I wanted a bit more of an acoustic sound this time round. So let me talk you through all of the instances of Textural pianos so far. The first one is actually pretty much the default patch. However, I did change layer 3 to Riverscape as demonstrated earlier to give us a bit more variety, and here's how this sounds. The dynamics gradually ramp up throughout the piece, and this is done of course using the mod wheel data, which I've programmed in by hand in this instance. So around here is probably where it starts to get interesting. And you can hear it's got a kind of almost like a sort of breathing effect where it sort of kind of fades in and then cuts out. And you can see this is done entirely just using the attack and release control. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like Moby or Sigur Rós, something like that. Our next instance is Whirlpool, or it's called Whirlpool because, as you can see, I soloed that layer and I was like, that'll do. So I've used just that one solely with the attack and release turned right up so that the kind of notes fade in and out nice and smoothly. But importantly, I also made use of the high pass filter here because, of course, the lower mid-range chords type thing is already handled by that first instance and we didn't want it to get too muddy sounding, so I cut off the lower frequencies of this one, and here's how that sounds. I don't think I've got any mod wheel data in this because it's all just one layer, so... And to show you how the high pass filter is affecting it, let me just turn it down. You can hear how useful that is in this particular context. Moving on, let's go and look at my electric track. All of these layers are from the electric section of the layers, and as a result we have a nice sort of sparkly type effect. As you can see and hear, delay is cranked right up, and I really love having textures like this, quite high register, almost like Mark tree kind of sounds, which really add to the sort of tonal palette of the piece. Our final instance of textural pianos is this one here called Octaves, which is just used for the outro, almost as this is a kind of different section. Here's how that sounds. So that's that. Now let me move on to our next piano, Epic Grand. And I've got two of these. I've got one that's doing these bass notes here, which I felt was really nice alongside the textures. Hype turned all the way up, of course. And the reverb, to match the textural pianos, I set the reverb to shimmer. I think by default it's on Hall, so that's just a little way of bringing the instruments together. This second instance of Epic Grand is playing this little tiny melody in the background. Play the two together. And you can hear the reverb on the melody is way longer for obvious reasons. Don't want the bass getting all muddy. In combination with the textures, here's how all of that sounds together. It's nice. It's sort of masked a little bit by all the textural piano that's going on, and I quite like that. I like the fact that it's not too distinct, because I'll admit it's not the most interesting melody in the world. Finally, our last piano is Fracture Sound's toy piano, and as you probably heard, this is used more of a rhythm instrument than a melodic instrument. And to try and make this one work as a rhythmic instrument, I actually went into its settings and turned on extended range, which gives us a bit more of the top end of the keyboard to work with, so that we could play higher up and then turn down things like the key clicks. Broken tuning is all the way down, and the atmosphere is turned all the way down. So that's how that one works. Moving on now to our Blueprint drum kit, we have one hi-hat line here, which I think also has this little cymbal splash. I think I tried to make this one fit in the more dreamy kind of ambience of this piece by turning the spot mic off, and I've turned up the hype as well. There was actually a kick and snare as well, which you can see I've muted, because in the context of the piece I actually felt it was starting to sound a little bit too similar to my last Blueprint demo. If you want to hear how it could have sounded, here it is now. Not too bad, it's sounding very Sigur Rós-esque, but I've decided actually I think I preferred it with just the hi-hat in the end. Next up, Bass guitar. Having retired the use of electric keys blueprint pitch shifted down 36 semitones to get a fat bass sound, I instead opted to do the same with bass guitar, leaning into a bit more of an electronic sound, and to do this I had it on amplified signal with the compression and drive maxed out, tone turned down as well, and here's how this sounds. Finally, our string section. Fracture Sounds short strings first up, doing this nice little ostinato. Tried to put a little bit more work into this one this week. Sounds quite pleasant to me. You can see I've tweaked around with the colour and the mic position just to fit it into the mix a little bit better. This one sounded good to me. If I move the perspective slider, we can hear how it sounds with the far mics. I quite like that definition that you get with the close mics. And then moving on, following these short strings, we've got textural violin here, which we heard right at the beginning of the piece, using the free tremolo articulation, which sounds lovely and really works nicely with the textural piano. Now if I solo this out with textural piano as well, match made in heaven, if you ask me. And our last part of the string section is string trio and gentle strings playing together in tandem. And you can see I've been very lazy and just simply made an alias to the original bit of MIDI, which is played in string trio. String trio has quite a soft attack, and so in the MIDI I've actually overlapped the notes, which kind of gives us a sort of pseudo legato type sound, which works really nicely, I think. Let's hear how it sounds. And then with gentle strings as well. And this is just a little bit crispier than using gentle strings on its own. Though to be honest, you could use either of these two and I think it would work really well. And that's it. Last couple of things I wanted to mention quickly for the sake of transparency is that I've done a tiny bit of subtle EQing here to help carve out a bit of space in the mix for textural pianos. I find with piano instruments in particular, you get a lot of action around this sort of 200 to 1000 kilohertz range. And so with the strings, I've carved out a little bit here so that you get more room for the piano basically. And this makes the string sound a bit brighter too. Other than that, I've got a little bit of compression on the bass, and then on toy piano I used Logic's sample delay, which just delays the left channel and the right channel in like a really small incremental amount, in this case 946 samples. And this is such a tiny delay that you don't really distinguish it as a delay, but because it's hitting your left ear at a different time to your right, it makes it sound wider. So let me just play it with it turned off and then I'll turn it on. That was just a nice little way of widening the stereo image. And I think for little instruments like this, it works really well. I wouldn't maybe recommend doing it on like a piano, say, because it would give you like phase issues. But for something like that, it helps a little bit. And then finally, last but not least, I put a little bit of a low shelf on Epic Grand so that the bass of that instrument didn't interfere with the bass guitar too much. And here's how those two sound together. If I turn it off, it doesn't sound quite as clean. It's getting a bit kind of thunderous sounding, so putting a little bit of a low shelf helps let the piano do what it's good at doing, i.e. all these sort of harmonics, and then the bass can really do that proper low end basically on its own. And I think that just about does it. A beautiful addition to the Blueprint lineup and a different take on the piano sound, to be honest. It's creating these textures out of piano performances, which is a fantastic idea, for which we have to thank our hallowed founder and CEO, Will Bedford. And you can download these textures for free. All you have to do is head over to the Fracture Sounds website, where you will find this fantastic instrument available to download. Otherwise, consider subscribing to the Fracture Sounds YouTube channel so that you don't miss any more textural instruments in the future. And I will see you when I see you. Goodbye.